why don't we get started? So hi everyone and welcome. I'm Adam Berezin from MS Dynamics World, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us for today's special session for ISVs and partners called Best Practices for Producing Dynamics Content That Works. The session will be presented by Maureen, Joyce, and Saita of Twirling Tiger Media. And we're very happy to have both of you with us today, so thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So before we get started, I'd like to actually just quickly mention why we decided to run this session and why I felt it was important for us to have Maureen and Ann do a webcast with us. And, you know, creating an effective content development and content marketing plan is vital to the success of ISVs and partners in the Dynamics community. I really can't stress that enough. And you know, there are some ISVs and partners in our community that have, I feel, kind of put this off and instead have relied on a handful of in-person trade shows for leads each year, which is not necessarily bad, but the issue with solely relying on the strategy is that you need to be marketing consistently every day, every week, and every month to try and get new prospects. And since trade shows happen so sporadically, they don't really provide a consistent flow of leads that's necessary to keep your pipeline full. Now, the good news is that by developing an effective content creation and content marketing strategy, you will be able to keep your pipeline full at all times. So that's really why I felt the need to run a session like this. Also, as a quick reminder, you can submit any questions you have during the session through the Q&A box on the right side of your screen. Maureen, Ann, and I will try to get to all of them at the end of the event. So without further delay, I'm going to turn it over to Maureen Joyce. Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you, Adam. Ann and I are very happy to be here today and offer you insight into our specialty, content marketing, both the writing and the design. And as Adam said, we'll have a time at the end to answer any questions for you, so do them up. Content marketing and custom content are both under the same umbrella of brand publishing. Their intention is to deliver informative educational content that builds relationships and community and positions you as a thought leader. Content marketing is predominantly outward-facing content created to attract and acquire new customers. It can be branded content, but it can also be brand-relevant content. Examples of content marketing are white papers, blogs, and social media. Custom content is meant to build an affinity with an existing audience. It reinforces your brand, communicates the value of your products or services, and it creates new opportunities. It's branded content used to maintain engagement with existing customers. And examples of custom content are publications and e-newsletters. And whatever your intention for content, we suggest you aim for originality and value to your prospects. In a few short years, I love this data fact because by 2020, which is not far away, more than 80%, according to surveys, of the buying process will happen without any direct human-to-human contact. Why is that? I think we all know people are self-educating about products and services online. And this has led to a changed buyer's journey. So to answer the content demand, you need a very strong online presence using a combination of content that's a blend of evergreen and topical. And so here are some examples of evergreen content for you, and those would be interviews with industry experts, tips, webinars, instructor videos, industry stats with original commentary, presenting one jolting statistic with original commentary on its consequences, and I'll have one of those for you. Case studies that show successes and failures, how-to guides that demonstrate how to solve a problem with a real solution, or how-to guides that may be helping beginners to advanced users, checklists, how to pick the best product with the definitions, advice from industry experts, and important reviews from third parties. A common mistakes list makes good evergreen content, and a single greatest tip roundup. So evergreen content builds SEO, a niche audience, and attracts steady readers over time. And topical content that I mentioned is news about your industry, your company, events, and hot trends. Topical content has a shorter shelf life, but it's important. So here, this infographic illustrates the alignment of content types or mediums from early stage to late stage that foster and create leads for your sales organization. And then once you've captured your customer, it illustrates the continued nurturing and upselling opportunities that various content types can create for you at the bottom of that funnel. And that's like a really important piece down there too. It's not just about the top part. It's just creating advocates for your company. So again, offering timely, seasonal, and evergreen content for customers at each stage of interest to engage and nurture the relationship is what you want to be doing. And this is a great infographic. It's something you could just sort of pin and use. It doesn't list every piece of content that you could do in there, but it gives you a sense of what you could do at the different stages. So you want to offer top-of-funnel prospects uniquely valuable educational content that focuses on their interests. And for the middle, you want to humanize your company and demonstrate how you've helped your clients. And then offer drill-down educational content that assures your customers close to making that purchase that they're making the right choice. Here's my jolting statistic I promised that illustrates the vast gap between awareness and implementation for marketers. So 79% of respondents in a recent survey confirmed the effectiveness of content marketing, but only 6% understood how to implement it. And this is where we can help you today on ways to close that gap. And it starts with understanding what your customers care most about. And to do that, you can use ways to gather feedback from your customers, such as interviews and surveys, focus groups, observations, monitoring communities and groups, customer service feedback, social media, and your email and web forms. You can prove your value through case studies and success stories. And keep in mind that the top questions executives ask when approving decisions are, what problem does it solve? Why do we need it? And what is the likely outcome or result? And answering those questions in your content will put you well on the way to better results with your content. And you want to create content that reaches all job titles and reframe your messaging so that it's focused on your audience's needs. It's a challenge sometimes to do this, but try writing copy without beginning a sentence with the word we, as in describing your company and all of the wonderful things that it does. And it really needs to be reframed to service the client's needs. And research where your target audience is to be sure you get in front of them. Consider which social media platforms and websites work best, and also look at where your competitors are gaining traction. Here. Recently read an article in Scientific America about a new book that argues that thought and knowledge are community efforts, and we build our fund of knowledge together. That said, third-party websites like MS Dynamics World provide an editorial environment that encourages a knowledge exchange. It attracts your community and offers your brand a platform for consideration among your audience and peers. So your presence in the right environment is as important as the content itself. And I think the numbers that MS Dynamics World has on promoting through email 210 white papers and 160 webcasts is probably a very good environment for your content marketing efforts. You want to promote your campaigns through social media. The best way to leverage your content marketing assets is to map them out in a monthly editorial calendar. There are many examples in the ether, from very simple trafficking plans that you can follow to more complex templates complete with ways to chart your results. Now, we're going to learn about how to get started creating content using an outline with 4 core elements so that your narrative, you hear a lot of people talk about narratives, is concise and consistent. So the 4 core elements in your narrative will be objective, personas, story, and medium. And also, you may have seen that we're offering an ebook at the end of the presentation called The Narrative Imperative, which covers, it drills down on these much more detail. So step 1 is to decide what your objective is for the content piece. And you may have more than one objective for a content piece. And these are the top functions cited by CMOs. So acquire new customers and members. Who doesn't want to do that? Increase brand relevance, perception, and awareness. Establish your brand as a thought leader. Move people along the sales funnel. Increase loyalty. And create new leads and nurture them with stage or interest-specific content. And if you go back to, if we went back to slide 4, we saw the types of content aligned with the various stages of a buyer's journey. So this is step 2, which is creating your personas. To whom are you selling? There are templates galore for creating customer personas out there, tools available to gather and distill your data that you collect. So you'll have more than one persona, but don't have too many, and don't get too detailed, or also don't guess at your profiles. Personas can help other departments in your organization beyond marketing, so it's helpful to share your results of what you come up with. One tried and true way you can develop personas is to use an old school technique of interviews and customer surveys, which will give you very valuable feedback. That way you can answer their priority initiative, success factors, perceived barriers, decision criteria, and buyer's journey. I would suggest spending about 10 to 30 minutes each month conducting interviews. And you can base your buyer personas on what you've learned in direct interviews with real buyers. Include buyers who choose your solutions and those who did not. And ask buyers to walk you through their decisions, starting with the moment they decided to solve their problem. That's how really you can get some wonderful information, is just reaching out to people. So now it's time to tell your story. It's creating your narrative. So again, self-educating audiences are demanding honest and original content. It's not interruptive advertising anymore. And so it's best to find and develop a story that will resonate with your audience. And now you have to support it with facts. You want to use quote attributions and cite all of your sources. You want to stay focused on the audience's challenges and pepper your narrative with an emotional appeal. How you solved a problem, why a solution was needed, and how your company's values played a role in the solution. Those are all very important things to consider when doing this. And so this approach creates honest and authentic content, which will develop trust, it'll develop loyalty and engagement with your audience. Part of creating the narrative is to establish your brand style, and the narrative includes both the words and the imagery. So you probably already have your company's style established, and you need to carry so many of those elements over into what you do for your content marketing as well. And this is where you can differentiate yourself from your competitors by expressing your company's style, personality, the depth of information you offer, your unique approach, and your value proposition. A cohesive look and tone and messaging will cement your brand into the minds of your audience. So consider creating a style guide if you don't already have one so that everyone in your team is on the same page. This is an example of two style guides, one from Microsoft and one from Ubuntu. And so at the top of the list is language style, and that's really important, and we'll get a little bit more into that as well as we go through, and Anne will probably address that too. So include budget for design and imagery in your content marketing. So you want to carefully consider the imagery you select, because done right, it will elevate the sophistication of your product offerings, and it will create the perfect marriage between your concept, the copy, and the imagery. It all has to be cohesive. Imagery needs to be a part of the collaboration within your team and not an afterthought. So your style will take shape in multiple dimensions: how your brand looks, how it sounds, how it thinks, how it performs, and ultimately is. Keeping the language and terminology that you use consistent is important. And you want to determine the tone that you want your content to convey. Is it friendly? Is it always short and to the point in a pithy way? Is it technical? Is it occasionally humorous? You want to set standards for length for your brand's content, so you're not creating a tome that people are just not going to dig in. And all of these things can be included in your style guide. And a note on the style guide, that can be a resource that should be updated periodically. So for clients that Twirling Tiger Media has, it's something that's revisited between the client and us periodically to keep it up to date, particularly when you're dealing with technical information. So here's two examples of two art colleges' home pages. On the left is a very static solution, and on the right is a more engaging solution with a call to action that puts the audience viewing it in the environment they are seeking to learn about. So you can see with just a little bit of effort and collaboration between the imagery, the designer, the writer, the results are far more compelling. Here's more on the importance of imagery. Words alone are not enough. So studies confirm that people remember only 30% of what they read, but when that information is paired with relevant images, people retain 65% of that information 3 days later. So a collaborating team of writers and designers can skillfully tie together elements which can better attract, acquire, and engage your target audience. So now we're going to move on to medium or content type. So it's time to build your content pipeline and drive your business objectives. So you want to consider what is easy for you and your team to create or even manage if you outsourced it. And again, be sure your followers want to receive information in your chosen platforms, the environment where you put your content. So far you've set your business objective, you've established your buyer personas, and you've crafted your story and aligned it with the stage and the sales funnel you want to affect. And here's a list of content types. I'll call out a few of these. Web-based ebooks are typically big on graphics and low on copy, making them perfect for executives and managers with little time to drill down on topics. Infographics are highly shareable and easily digestible. They create followers and advocates for your company. And it's a way to distill very complex technical information and show it graphically to like a range of readers. The leadership guides can capture the attention of C-level decision makers. It can be subtly branded content in the form of a professional development guide. And newsletters are a great way to communicate your brand and add value with your existing customers. And you can help your customers leverage your products or services in newsletters. And success stories. Nothing shows the value of your company's products and customer service more than a satisfied customer willing to tell the world about how you help transform their process or procedures. Okay, so we'll move on from there. So avoiding some common pitfalls by keeping your content on target. You can do that by providing content that empathizes with your customers' problems. Again, it's sort of taking the we out of your narrative and just turning the focus on your customers' issues. Be sure to offer solutions in language your audience can understand. You want to consider, are you addressing seasoned pros and a combination of folks that are new to your industry? What is your audience's knowledge level? The personas will help you decide who influences the purchase decision. On all content you produce, you want to make the customer's next steps simple and clear through effective CTAs. And at the bottom, there's an example of CTA. In addition to that, some things that you can do are choose the media format that will most effectively deliver the message. And keep in mind that content marketing is like any marketing strategy. You need to test your ideas to see what works. You can evaluate results after 3 to 6 months. And if some of your decisions don't offer the results you're looking for, then tweak them and give it another 3 to 6 months instead of completely tearing it up. And content programs should have a dedicated content or editorial director to make sure that your narrative and your objectives remain on course. And of course, you want to point all social traffic to your website. Okay. Ways to optimize response to your content. Your content needs to resonate with your user personas. So employ using keywords with the voice of your customer. And create content that answers the questions or the intent of your audience. You always want to put yourself in their shoes and make sure that you're answering their questions. Offer exceptional content that provides real value to your audience. It's educational, it's informative. And create a multi-channel content mix to make sure that you're present where your audience is. And you want to appeal to helping your customers succeed in their jobs. taken up enough of your time, and I'm going to hand it over to Saita, and she's going to walk you through our case study.
Okay, thank you, Maureen. Sorry about that. Just to let our audience know, we had some technical difficulties earlier, so Maureen is still going to maintain control of the slides as I move through our own narrative. Up to now, we've been talking about content marketing concepts and applications, and what I'd like to do is discuss some best practices, starting with walking you through the creation of a common type of content marketing vehicle that's popular with MS Dynamics World members, and that's the white paper. There are different types of white papers. Many are technical in nature and try to break new ground or show a different side to a solution. This is going to be a little bit different because it's going to focus on the business side of a technical application. We're going to focus on one project that we did recently that worked well in terms of process, project management, and the deliverable. Normally at that point, at Twirling Tiger, that's where we jump off of a project. But based on the initial feedback that I've received, this white paper is working exactly as intended. It's bringing in new leads. It's showing a lot of interest from people that previously weren't interested, and it's nurturing existing relationships. A lot of people wanted to get a hold of this particular deliverable. So another caveat, at Twirling Tiger, not only do we create content you can sink your teeth into, but it's also content you get full credit for. We are like silent partners who work hard behind the scene to make sure that our clients look great. And as a result, we have these NDA-like requirements, and that's the case here too. So I'm not going to mention the client by name. Instead, I'm going to focus on the project itself. I will say that this case study is typical for us, and it involves a Boston-based software provider who wanted to gain a stronger foothold in healthcare IT. They had previously done very well in the retail space. So as part of a broad marketing strategy on their part, the company wanted to enhance its thought leadership and documentation productivity. So that's where the aim was. It had deep enough pockets to hire a third party to conduct a survey of healthcare and healthcare IT executives, managers, and clinicians with decision-making power. That said, most of you on the call probably don't have that. Smaller organizations can also conduct their own surveys with using a number of tools, many of them even free, that not only provide guidance for what and how to pose questions, but also aggregate responses, develop themes, and give you ideas for the content that you would like to provide that aligns with what you're seeing out there as a need. Once this survey was done, it was time to create a white paper around it, and so this is where our journey begins. Next slide. So going back to those four criteria, every content marketing project should start with a kickoff call to go over the expectations and the course of action. So referring to the earlier slides that Maureen had discussed, the objective in this case was to position the company as experts in documentation productivity that saves patients, providers, and healthcare partners time and financial resources and helps them to better leverage their electronic health records. And they decided to focus on EHRs because 96% of hospitals have one in place and are ready to upgrade. The persona, their ideal reader was a healthcare system CIO, CMO, or CMIO, which is a chief medical officer or chief medical informatics officer. The tone would be conversational and engaging. It would not be highly technical and instead would focus on best practices for using an EHR. And by conversational engaging, what does that mean? Here's where the language nuance comes in. We're talking about using a mixture of sentence lengths, paragraph lengths, sentence structures, not all simple sentences, some complex. The language maybe has a little bit of a literary lilt to it, but it sounds like something that people would actually say, and you're guided by what actually people say. So there's A little bit of inside baseball talk to make sure that people understand you understand this industry, but it's not alphabet soup. The acronyms are kept to a minimum, and they're always defined, because what is an acronym in one industry may not be the same in another, and sometimes I've found even within an industry they differ. So make sure that you always explain, at least on first or second reference, what that acronym stands for before using it repeatedly. The storyline focused on the clinician's journey and specific pain points that were identified in this survey. And the medium they decided was a white paper. Why a white paper? Well, for starters, it allowed for more information to be included, and that information could be later cut and diced for blog posts, individual case studies, success stories, and then all of these things promoted through social platforms. So it was a great piece to have in hand for upcoming IT conferences too. And we didn't do this, but if you record or videotape interviews, you can then repurpose those in a multimedia format. This project originally was 1,500 words, and it rose to 2,500 because we got so much good material from the interviews that we didn't want to let a lot of it go on the cutting floor. And 2,500 words is about 6 to 8 pages. Generally speaking, a success story should be 600 to 800 max. If you're going to make it text dense, a case study should be up to 1,200, maybe 1,500 if you've got a really compelling case study, and these would be broken up with imagery. And then white papers are generally between 1,200, 1,500 or more. So, next slide. So what we did, the client selected 4 CMOs and CMIOs to interview, and these were based on existing relationships that their sales and marketing teams had. They approached each and asked them, if they would participate. We gave them the questions in advance so that it would move along the interviews, and they would know exactly which ones they could and couldn't answer just based on their level of expertise. And then we also made sure that we provided them an opportunity to review a draft before the piece went into design, just to make sure that it was accurate based on what they said, and that was reflected. And that is, I think, a really important step, because people then feel more receptive to participating if they feel like they have more control in the process. So the interviews themselves went very well. We were able to talk to some very busy people within a week's time, and that let the project continue to gain momentum and not stall. I wanted to talk a little bit about statistics here. In this instance, the stats came from the survey results, but a lot of times, we infuse pieces with them, and it's important that if someone says something that can be quantified or throws out a statistic, it has to be vetted before you can use it. You've got to find out where that source originated from and cite it. Maureen mentioned this earlier, but that is where a lot of the credibility comes into play. Stats are also important to bolster a claim that someone might make, including the company that's behind the study. After 2 drafts, we were done, and we finished all of this under 3 weeks' time. Normally, this takes a month or more due to schedules, but again, working with the sales team, we were able to get everybody on board pretty quickly. Everyone was pleased with the final product. The physicians were also happy to have participated and promised to help again if they could. Sales loved that the focus was on the survey insights and the clinical journey, and it was not on their products. And I want to repeat, sales was really happy that there was not much of a sell in the piece, because they thought that it lent the content more credibility. Next slide. So why this worked so well? We started off with a mutual agreement called a custom content order, and this outlined everyone's role and responsibilities. This is where that kickoff call comes back into play, that we wrote down the key learning points, the main objectives, both for the brand and for the reader, the tone and voice to make sure it was brand consistent. The client provided online resources so that the writer could bone up on the topic before approaching the physicians, and then they also were the ones to create the initial outreach to these subject matter experts, which again in this case were the clinicians. The sales and marketing personnel were involved to help broker these interviews and leverage their relationships to gain access to, again, very, very busy people. This, you know, one way for particularly smaller companies to gain this buy-in right off the start is in the buying cycle. When you're onboarding a new client, put in the SLA that, you know, if, you know, they want, they can participate in a future case study or success story, and then you just couch it as, we know you're going to love our product so much that you're going to want to, you know, let other people know about it. Then you also at that point introduce them very briefly to the marketing people that will be shepherding that case study, white paper, success story, ebook, whatever it is, you know, down the road. And then that way you've got, they're not dumbfounded when you come to them out of nowhere and say, what, you know, because I've found that getting that sign-off to participate is often the highest hurdle to overcome in creating this kind of content. The clinicians in this case were comfortable with the interviews and the interviewer because the questions, they were pointed, they were balanced, they were mapped to a survey, and they showed what actually was happening within hospitals. In fact, one of the physicians was very critical of the survey results because they didn't align with what he was seeing within his own organization. And so that contrarian view was very important because chances are there were many other CMIOs out there that thought like he did. And then finally, the everyone's expectations were outlined and followed. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, this project, this project is typical of the work that content producers and marketing departments create by working together, and it's, you know, based on our 20+ years of experience in this area, we wanted to suggest some best practices for the content creators among you. Next slide. I think we might actually be a slide behind. So if you need help, you want to generate a lot of content, but creating great content on a regular basis is just a little more bandwidth than you have at the moment, you might consider partnering with a content creation company. Most business owners, especially small businesses, their first inclination is to do all of their content marketing in-house. It's typically more cost-effective and you can leverage the talent that you already have, but sometimes talent or time is in short supply, so that's where outsourcing comes in. So now on this slide, we're going to talk about evaluating content providers, and these are some suggestions that you might include. You want to consider their core capabilities. Do they understand your industry and your position within that field? For instance, with our company, Maureen and I are very fluent in technology because that's where our backgrounds are. We hire writers and editors and designers who also understand technology companies. That said, we've also worked with entrepreneurs in finance, business, education, a wide variety, but you want to see where their sweet spot is. What is their workflow? What is the process that they use, and how well does it meld with your own workflows? You want to look to see what makes them unique. This is highly subjective, and for us, again, just to use as an example, not only do we have the technology backgrounds, but we are certified as a woman-owned business, which is important for some of the companies that we work with because it shows a commitment on their part to supplier diversity and to different perspectives on problem solving. We are also insured against errors and omissions, which distinguishes us from freelancers who normally do not carry such policies. Next slide. So how can you help build content marketing success? If you have a style guide, share it to prevent a lot of post-work editing to maintain brand compliance. And if you don't have one, as Maureen suggested earlier, consider creating one for both words and imagery. You want to have at the ready some examples of content that you like for one reason or another, and maybe something that you don't like or that you really liked but it fell flat. Was it a blog post that wasn't SEO friendly, a newsletter that hasn't been updated for several years and is losing subscribers, that sort of thing. If you're not sure where to start small. Most websites have some sort of blog to gain some creative flow and online traction. Blog posts, they're very easy not only to create, but also easy to repurpose over time. You can recreate them into other types of vehicles, such as ebooks and even white papers. Finally, put any project in writing so that everyone is working off the same assignment. Don't set unrealistic deadlines and don't put poor time managers in charge. Next slide. The last thing that I want to talk about is to carefully consider who gets a say as content is created. Again, this is based on many, many years of experience. Ideally, there's one internal point person to shepherd a project through completion. That person solicits feedback from all stakeholders. Beware of scope creep if the feedback request doesn't include information on the project scope and intent, either copying from that content order that was created at the kickoff call and followed by the writer in the email, or just attaching it as a separate document. This way people know why something reads and looks as it does. Doesn't mean that they're going to sign off on it as is, but they at least know where the writer and the editor and the graphic designer were coming from. So with our process, the writer will create the first draft. That draft is given to that point person. The point person solicits feedback from everybody included in that paper, and the other people within the organization that are involved in marketing, sales, up to the CEO. Then all of the feedback is put into one document, sent back to the writer works it from there, submits a second document. That is the document that goes into design. So notice there's not 8 different revisions. This forces people to pay attention more quickly, not put something off, and also to kind of focus all in for a very specific amount of time. When you go through multiple revisions, again, scope creep comes in, so much time languishes that the piece loses whatever oomph it had or whatever tie to a timely topic it may have had. So that, in a nutshell, is, something to be aware of. When a piece is well done, great things can happen. People who like what they read contact you to learn more. Others help promote your solutions through social networks because they love the piece that was created. And leads become easier to generate. Next slide. Okay, so now I will turn it back over to Adam and Maureen to see if there are any questions that you guys have, or if there's anything else that you would like us to discuss in the time that we have remaining.
Great, thanks, Ann. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a Q&A box at the right hand of your screen, bottom right hand, and if you want to submit questions, please type them in there, and then we will hopefully be able to answer them. We'll give people just a minute or so to kind of collect their thoughts. Actually, we have one question that just came in. the question is, what are the most important things to emphasize when creating any piece of dynamics-focused content? I can actually answer this one. So I would say that that there are a few things I think that kind of share equal importance. The first is you have to clearly define the dynamics product group that you're trying to reach. So for example, if you focus your solutions primarily on the Dynamics AX community, then you want to make sure that your white paper calls attention, for example, to the AX community. So it's much more targeted, and you'll get those types of people in the AX community that you essentially want to reach. And then I would say you also want to kind of make sure who you're targeting within the AX community, whether it's partners or end customers, and you want to make sure that that is called attention to as well. And then you also want to touch upon the business focus area and or industry. So for example, if you're a company that has an AP automation solution, you'd want to make sure, and you focused on AX and you wanted to reach out to partners, you'd want to make sure that whatever piece of content you create calls attention to Dynamics AX customers, for example, who have a focus on AP automation. So you just want to make it as targeted as possible, and if you do that, it'll be consumed more than if you were to just sort of create a general AP automation focused white paper. Here's a question, and I'll throw it to either Maureen or Ann. How do you keep track of the, quote, productivity of particular content, or should you?
I'll go first, and then oh, this is Ann.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good. Yeah. And I have something to add to that also, but why don't you go first?
I'm sorry. Okay. I would just say you create a timeline. And again, that happens during the kickoff call because that's when you have all the principals that are involved in the project on the call. And then you have a taskmaster that tries to adhere to that. And again, you make sure that the deadlines are realistic for both the company and the people that you're going to be talking to, so you don't make them overly aggressive so that you're already kind of set up for failure. And if things do get delayed, you just kind of stay on top of them. So that's from an actual project standpoint. Maureen might be able to discuss, from a more broader project management standpoint, how we work and using a project management tool and that sort of thing, because we're constantly juggling multiple projects, as are everybody involved in this.
And let me just quickly jump in here. One of the key elements of the question was, how do you keep track of the productivity of particular content? I think what this person is probably referring to, and maybe this person can help clarify if they want to send a follow-up question as well. But basically, how do you know which pieces of content are working best? So let's say that you've created a white paper, a case study, and a product brochure. How do you know which one of those items has generated the most leads? And from that data, if you're able to capture it and track it somehow, that, in my opinion, gives you an idea of what types of content you should continue to create and put more emphasis on. So, for example, if you're finding that 90% of the leads that you're generating are coming from a product brochure, and you've paid to develop 3 pieces of content, a case study, a white paper, and a product brochure, and once again, 90% of the leads you're getting are coming through people, downloading or viewing just one piece of that content, then, that's an indication that you should continue creating more of those types of pieces of content, but also maybe kind of rethink a strategy for, creating, let's say, additional white papers and case studies that might resonate better than the ones previously created. And to this person's second point about should you track that, yes, you should track that. You should find a way to track it, whether it's through your own site or through a third-party website like MS Dynamics World. But regardless of how you do it, it's important that you track how each piece of content that, you know, you've paid to have developed is performing.
I can weigh in if you'd like on measuring content a little bit. I think that, as you said, Adam, you know, if something's working, keep going with it. But the first step toward measuring content effectiveness is to define effectiveness for your company. And so you can go back to your business objective and see what that is. And is it to increase website traffic? Is it lead generation? Is it brand awareness? And you can measure every single one of those things, but you need to define your key performance indicator. And then once that's done, you can set up your benchmark and goals, because scorecards need goals. So your goals might be aligned with your business objectives. For instance, it could be, the goal could be like requests for demos or free trials, lead form sign-ins, newsletter sign-ups, web traffic, those sorts of things. I think, you know, white paper downloads, as Anna mentioned, demo requests. So you have to figure out what it is exactly your objective is and then measure it. And again, there's lots of ways to measure that. There's lots of programs to measure content as well. And so that's a whole can of worms, like measuring your content. And I think I had mentioned there are all sorts of ways out there that you can research to measure your content.
Great, thank you. Let's see if we have any more questions. This is a question for you guys. Someone's asking if you can give a price range of how much I can expect to spend on creating a white paper.
Maureen, I'll turn that one over to you.
I actually don't have my price list in front of me. I did print one out recently, and I don't have it in front of me. But if you want to reach out to Ann or I, we can give you a sense of, you know, what the industry is charging for such thing.
Well, I'll take it then. Yeah, again, it depends on if you go with a freelancer, if you go with a boutique company like ours, or if you go with a large publishing house. The rates are going to vary significantly. It also depends on how much you're involved, but essentially, you know, based on my limited knowledge of two groups, but intimate knowledge of one, you can expect to pay $1 a word to $1.50 a word for a freelancer, a little bit more for a boutique custom content company, primarily because you're getting both the words and design included in that, so it's probably closer to $2 a word. And then with a large publishing house, because they have scale, it may be less than a freelancer, or it could be a lot more. But that generally is how pricing is determined. So the length has a lot to do with it, and the number of interviews and outside resources that are involved, as well as the amount of imagery that needs to be created.
Thank you. Looks like we have another question. Someone's asking what would you consider to be the most important piece of content or type of content to create? I'll take a stab at this. I think it really just depends on who you want to target. So if you're looking for, and I would focus that more on sort of stage of the purchase cycle. So if you want people that are more sort of information gatherers and you're just sort of looking to build up your pipeline, I would probably say white papers are the way to go. If you want to generate people that are in sort of the stages of the purchase cycle, I would probably suggest case studies. And if you want to generate sort of those later stage leads, I would recommend putting more of an emphasis on demo videos and product brochures and product literature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if you can still see my screen, but I pulled up that graphic again that aligns the different stages with the different content types. I think, you know, it's important just to, in general, to have that steady stream of content marketing to give your products and services greater visibility as a solution to challenges, because, you know, as we looked at that other data fact, the sales funnel is changing, and people are self-educating, and it's so important to have a presence and have the type of content that people are looking for, which is informational, educational, online at the ready for any interest.
Yeah, and I would just also add something too. I mean, there's so many different components to to creating a content strategy, but I would say that something that's really overlooked by a lot of companies, surprisingly, is the most important part, which is the execution of sort of the marketing strategy behind getting leads from the content that you've developed. So you spend all this money and this time, working with a firm to create content, and then, a lot of companies will sort of just put the content on their site, and they really won't do anything with it, and it just kind of remains stagnant, and it won't generate the amount of leads that they want, and then they think that it was kind of a useless exercise. And I think, for those companies, they sort of overlook the importance of, being proactively, or I should say being proactive in promoting the content, not just on their own site, but finding, third-party channels to do so.
Absolutely, Adam, and I would just reiterate that places like MS Dynamics World are excellent for providing that channel, because not only does it broaden their audience, but it provides that third-party credibility. This piece is, worth putting up on our site so that you can get more bang for your buck that way.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and even if it's not using our site, just you want to use something. You want to just make sure that that your content is being pushed in front of people that you want to try to reach. Regardless of what channel you decide to use, you should just be doing that. And you also, once again, want to have metrics in place. You want to be able to, as we talked about earlier, and as one of the attendees asked, you want to make sure that you track everything, because you want to be able to prove the ROI to yourself and to your team and to your management, if you're not management, that content creation works and content marketing works. So it's important to track everything.
Well said.
Let me see if we have any more. All right, so it's I think it's about time to wrap it up. So I'd like to say a big thank you to Maureen and Ann for presenting today. I hope all of you learned a lot. I did record this session, so we can send out a link to everybody who attended today, in case you want to go back and review some things during the session. And also, when you click out of the session, there'll be a post-event survey. It's just a quick survey. There's like a few questions, so it helps us, when we plan these webcasts. So if you wouldn't mind just taking a minute or so to fill that out, that would be great. And thanks again, everybody, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, everyone.
Yep. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye now.